The church tried to silence him, governments expelled him, and every mission he built was destroyed. But this poor baker still rebuilt Catholicism across Europe. A poor village boy from Moravia would grow into one of the hardest men in Europe to silence. He was born on the 26th of December, 1751 in Tasovice, or modern Tasovice, in Moravia. At baptism, he received the name John, though history would remember him as Clement Mary Hofbauer. He came from a large and poor family, and most sources describe him as one of 12 children. His father was a butcher and grazier, and his father died when John was still very young. That loss mattered because it closed the simplest road to schooling and pushed him toward manual work. Instead of entering a seminary as a boy, he had to earn his bread with his hands. He worked as a baker's apprentice, and baking remained part of his life for years. Yet, the desire for the priesthood did not leave him, even when his circumstances seemed designed to crush it. He studied whenever he could, using spare moments that most people would have wasted. At one stage, he served in a Premonstratensian monastery at Brook, where he gained both work and access to learning. That combination of poverty, discipline, prayer, and frustration would shape the rest of his life. The first great turn in his story came when solitude itself could not hold him. Drawn to a more radical life, he tried living as a hermit more than once. After pilgrimages to Rome, he spent time near Tivoli under the protection of Barnaba Chiaramonti. That bishop would later become Pope Pius VII, which makes this connection unusually striking in hindsight. During this period, John took the name Clement, and he added Mary out of devotion to the Virgin. He prayed, served pilgrims, and embraced a hidden life, but the call to priesthood remained stronger. Even the hermit's cell did not resolve his vocation, because he was not called merely to withdraw. Meanwhile, the political climate in Habsburg lands worked against him. Emperor Joseph II had abolished hermitages and heavily controlled religious life, making genuine formation more difficult. So Clement returned again to ordinary labor, again to Vienna, and again to uncertainty. His vocation advanced in broken steps, not in a straight line, and that is part of what makes him compelling. He did not glide into holiness through comfort, but fought for it through repeated interruption. The next breakthrough came through one of those providential encounters that changes an entire life. A well-known account says he met 2 women after serving Mass and helping them in bad weather. In conversation, they learned that he and his friend Thaddeus Hubel lacked money for priestly studies. Those benefactors offered support, and that financial help opened a door that talent alone had not opened. Clement studied in Vienna, though he had to do so under a system shaped by Josephinist state control. By then, he was older than most students and had already lived more life than many future priests ever would. In 1784, he made another journey on foot to Rome with Thaddeus Hubel beside him. There, the two entered the Redemptorist novitiate at San Giuliano on the Esquiline. They professed vows on 19th March 1780 and were ordained priests shortly afterward. Saint Alphonsus Liguori, founder of the Redemptorists, was still alive and reportedly saw promise in these 2 men. That matters because Clement would become the figure who carried the order beyond its Italian cradle. For that reason, later generations would call him the second founder of the Redemptorists. Now the mission widened, and it widened in a city standing on the edge of catastrophe. Because the political situation blocked a stable Redemptorist foundation in Vienna, Clement and Thaddeus turned north. They arrived in Warsaw in the later 1780s and were entrusted with St. Benno's church. The church served German-speaking Catholics and had been left weak and neglected after wider upheavals. Warsaw itself was in a fragile condition, and the end of Polish independence was approaching. Clement did not arrive in a triumphant setting, but in a city full of poverty, confusion, and spiritual need. At first, the Redemptorists lived in severe poverty and even preached to nearly empty benches. They had to gain trust slowly, as foreigners working among people who had reason to be suspicious. Clement and his companions learned Polish and expanded their work beyond one narrow community. At St. Benno's, they developed what became famous as a perpetual mission. Sources describe 5 sermons a day, some in German and some in Polish, with confessions, devotions, and catechesis woven through the week. This was not casual parish maintenance, but relentless apostolic pressure applied day after day. His greatness in Warsaw was not only in preaching, but in building concrete works for abandoned people. He founded an orphanage for homeless boys when ordinary charity proved too small for the need before him. That refuge later developed further, and schools were also established for poor children. Some accounts speak of a boys' school, a poor school, and even a secondary school connected with his efforts. There was also educational work supported by noble women of Warsaw for girls. Clement begged constantly to feed, clothe, and house the children in his care. One story preserved in later accounts says he even returned to bakery work when bread was urgently needed. His practical charity matched his preaching, which is why he won loyalty from both common people and intellectual circles. He also helped instruct Protestants and Jews, showing the breadth of his missionary concern. The work expanded enough for Redemptorist vocations and new foundations in Poland, Switzerland, and southern Germany. Yet the world around him was turning more violent, more suspicious, and more hostile to Catholic institutions. The same man who built visible works of mercy would spend years watching political powers tear them apart. Then came the long collision between his mission and the age of revolution and empire. The partitions of Poland shattered the political world in which he had been working. Napoleonic forces and hostile authorities increasingly treated religious communities as obstacles rather than allies. In 1808, Clement was imprisoned, and his community in Warsaw was suppressed. After years of exhausting labor, he was expelled from the country he had served so intensely. This is one of the clearest patterns in his life, because almost every visible success was followed by disruption. The houses he helped found beyond Warsaw also suffered from the political and religious tensions of the era. Many of those foundations in Germany and Switzerland had to be abandoned. His mission seemed to collapse repeatedly under external pressure. But this is exactly where his character becomes most useful for a serious audience. He was not a saint of easy victories, but a saint of reconstruction after every defeat. Every time power closed one door, he started again somewhere else without changing his objective. The final act of his life unfolded in Vienna, where influence replaced visibility. After Warsaw and after the death of Thaddeus Hubel in 1807, Clement finally settled in Vienna. He first served in restricted ways because the Austrian system still distrusted religious orders. He worked as a hospital chaplain during the Napoleonic assault on Vienna in 1809, caring for wounded soldiers. Later, he served at a small Italian church, and from 1813 he became chaplain to the Ursuline convent. That official title sounds narrow, but in practice his reach extended across the city. He became famous as a preacher, confessor, counselor, and spiritual father. Rich and poor sought him out, and so did students, converts, writers, and politicians. EWTN specifically notes his influence on figures among the German Romantics, including men like Friedrich Schlegel and Zacharias Werner. His education had been irregular and often frustrated, yet he still shaped scholars and statesmen. That is one reason he earned the title Apostle of Vienna. He was not merely active in Vienna, but spiritually formative for Vienna at a critical time. What made him famous was not spectacle, but concentrated force directed at souls. Multiple sources stress his energy, his drive, and his indefatigable work in the confessional. He visited the sick, advised the troubled, and offered material help to students and the poor. He became a center of Catholic renewal in an atmosphere shaped by rationalism, bureaucracy, and state interference. Some accounts say he helped block plans for a German national church at the Congress of Vienna. Whether one emphasizes that specific intervention or not, his broader role is clear. He strengthened Catholic identity in a city where political elites had become used to controlling religion from above. He also helped lay the groundwork for a Catholic college in Vienna, which some summaries describe as his crowning work. By the end of his life, the Redemptorist mission north of the Alps had real roots because of him. That is why the title's second founder is not pious exaggeration, but a historical judgment. He adapted the Redemptorist apostolate to Central and Northern Europe without surrendering its core mission. In a hostile age, he proved that missionary persistence can outlast governments, armies, and fashionable ideologies. The end came quietly, but even there his life carried one last irony. Clement Mary Hofbauer died in Vienna on 15 March 1820, worn down by labor and exhaustion. The Archdiocese of Vienna records that his remains were first buried in Maria Enzersdorf in Lower Austria. His relics were later transferred, and today he is closely associated with Maria am Gestede in Vienna. Reliable modern sources agree that Pope Leo XIII beatified him on 29th of January 1888. Pope Pius X canonized him on 20th of May 1909. Britannica adds that Pius X later declared him patron saint of Vienna in 1940. He is also widely honored as a patron of Warsaw, and many sources associate him with bakers as well. As for miracles, modern reliable summaries emphasize his sanctity, conversions, and enduring intercession more than dramatic miracle stories from his lifetime. His causes for beatification and canonization required miracles, but concise public sources do not consistently preserve the details in a uniform way. That restraint is fitting, because his most obvious miracle was the scale of spiritual renewal he produced under conditions that should have broken him. He turned poverty into ministry, exile into expansion, and suppression into a wider Catholic revival. His legacy is unusually sharp for a saint who began as a baker and failed hermit. He stands at the meeting point of personal poverty, political oppression, and missionary audacity. He knew what it meant to be blocked by law, by money, by empire, and by cultural contempt. He lost foundations, watched institutions collapse, and saw whole decades of work attacked from above. Yet he kept building, kept preaching, and kept hearing confessions as if defeat were only another assignment. That is why he matters far beyond Redemptorist history. He shows how Catholic renewal often comes not from prestige, but from stubborn fidelity under pressure. He was linked to Saint Alphonsus by vocation, to Thaddeus Hubel by friendship, and to Pope Pius VII by an early chapter of his hermit life. He served the abandoned in Warsaw and shaped intellectual life in Vienna without ever becoming a comfortable man of the establishment. He is remembered not because he fit his age, but because he fought against its spiritual weaknesses. Saint Clement Mary Hofbauer remains a model of disciplined zeal, practical charity, and endurance after repeated ruin. Being Catholic is based. Be one yourself. Subscribe for daily saints and Catholic history.